an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece episodes 533 through 535. It's an emergency! The Ryugu Palace is occupied. The Ryugu Palace in shock, the kidnapping of Shirahoshi, and Horty's onslaught, the retaliatory plan set into motion. In these episodes, our friends inadvertently do some things that make them look like they're pretty bad people. Luffy inadvertently seems to have kidnapped the princess. And overall, our friends' reputations are really taking a beating. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Florian for commissioning this episode. Florian is here in the chat talking about how there is some leftover cheese from breakfast at the hotel for work. And it's so weird because Florian, I just recorded for somebody else who is on a trip for work at the moment. So I don't know why, but apparently work trips are in the air at the moment. These episodes are really, really fun. You guys, I have such a weird relationship with the arcs in this show. I feel like almost every time when a new arc begins, I'm all about it. And then by the time it wraps up, I'm sort of like, can we just get a move on here? Oh my god. So it's sort of funny because like I was pretty stoked about the Sabaody arc, but then it doesn't really end up being a Sabaody arc. They're only there fairly briefly before it turns into the War of the Best. Our friends all get separated and then there's a whole different thing going on. And that was like the first arc that was actually a lot shorter than I anticipated, and I almost feel like I wish we had more time there. Like, that's not really that I wish the arc had gone on longer. It's more that I wish we had spent more time on Sabaody, just like hanging out, maybe having a couple of like filler episodes, and then we went to the War of the Best, which was less long. But as of right now, this arc I'm really, really enjoying, and I hope that by the end of it, I am not sick and tired of it. Because, like, as of right now, the way that it has all been set up feels pretty tight to me. Like, and when I say tight, what I mean when I say that is, first of all, in comparison to a lot of One Piece arcs, which are often not tight at all, but as of right now, everything is sort of like coming together in a way that feels like different pieces that are in play are being used well, and our characters and who they are like have mattered for the way things have shaken out in a way that sometimes it feels like we make people act out of character for certain things to happen. And I also really enjoy the king and the princes a lot so far. Their personalities just feel much more interesting to me than, I keep wanting to say than other villains, but they're not even meant to be villains. Like, obviously, it's supposed to be Horty and Decken that are the villains. I think, like, in contrast to something like Alabasta, for example, we're dealing with the villain Crocodile, who is very compelling, charismatic, has a cool power, and is extremely intelligent. And then we have a king that has very little real personality to me. And we've got the princess that you guys know, by the end of it, I could not stand her. I was so sick of her. And so even though fighting for Alabasta and freeing them from the clutches of the evil crocodile was absolutely the right thing to do, I just couldn't care that much by the time it happened. Like, I was just, and here I am feeling a lot more invested because I like the king, I like the princes, and even though the princess is, as Luffy says, a real pain in the butt, I understand how she's so sensitive and crying all the time because she's been like as isolated and sheltered as it gets, being in one room for 10 years. So all together, I'm actually like, I just care much more, So, all right, let's begin with 533. It's an emergency. And every time I say it's an emergency, I am saying it in my head with an Australian accent because that is a Simpsons reference. And if you don't get it, I'm so sorry. It's not important. But there's an Australia episode of that show that is very funny and pretty famous. And you can find a clip pretty quickly. But anyway, so yeah, we pick up where we left off with like Zoro coming out, fighting for his friends. And all of the fishmen who are here with the king are genuinely shocked at the fact that, one, Zoro was able to get out of his prison, and two, that when Neptune tries to fight him, Zoro is able to stand up against him. And so the tactic that the fishmen plan to take is they are going to get rid of the bubble that all of our earthbound friends rely on to live. But before they can do it, the bubble actually begins to expand and encompass everybody in the room, giving the Straw Hats the major advantage here. And everyone is like looking around like, wait, the fuck? How did this even happen? And then we see Nami, who says, sorry, I couldn't help myself once I saw this big piece of bubbly coral. Which I guess is just a piece of decor in the room. It is quite handy. And I love how casual she is about it. Like, she's smiling through all of this, like, no big deal, whatever. So I sort of was thinking, like, if you have guests that are not able to breathe underwater, and they're in the main throne room and you're about to, like, invite them to a banquet, I feel like maybe you should go ahead and activate this as a indication of your hospitality. This should have been on already, is what I'm saying. But it does make a good little surprise moment. So Zoro says, so what do you say we finish what we started? And you guys, this is so funny to me because the king keeps calling him Zori, and Zoro is getting so mad about it. And if you had asked me how much Zoro would care that he was being given the wrong name, I really do think I would have said he wouldn't give a shit. Like, it took me by surprise, in other words, that he kept getting so mad about it. And I'm not, I find it very entertaining, so it's fine. But genuinely, I was sort of thinking that he was somebody who tends to just, like, not really give a shit about a lot. And so the level of anger coming from him caught me off guard. Neptune tells his men to stand down and is like, I'm going to fight him myself. And one of his people, they're like, you can't do this. He says, I won't allow you to commit such barbaric acts. Which I was sort of like, what is barbaric? Like, fighting? You guys fight all the time, it appears. What do you even mean? But Neptune is like, all right, well, I am going to go up against these guys alone because these foes are actually pretty badass, and I am concerned about all of y'all getting hurt. So he comes at Zoro, and we cut from him attacking to Luffy, who is trying to convince the princess to leave her tower. And like I said, I do really enjoy, even though it's so annoying that she cries so much, I can't help but like understand where the princess is coming from and how sheltered she is, and just have a lot of sympathy for her, which is sort of funny because this sort of thing, I'm going to say out of the gate, it is really possible that we are going to hit a point where I don't feel this way anymore, where I don't have this sort of patience with her, and I am just like, oh my god, bitch, shut the fuck up. So I'll just freely cop to that. You know, it may be that this is just going to fucking irritate me after a time. But as of right now, I'm in this really nice spot where I not only understand where she's coming from, but am truly tickled at Luffy's reaction to her and his impatience with her. So I can understand both sides of it and just find myself giggling because Luffy is it's not even that he's impatient with her exactly, it's that he is open about his irritation in a way that isn't the norm for how people behave. Usually we like to keep how we feel when we're aggravated with somebody under wraps a little bit, to be polite, to try and convince them to do what we're wanting them to do. And Luffy just doesn't give a shit about any of that because he is so used to... I was about to say he's so used to getting his way. I was going to change what I said because I felt like that made him sound bratty. But once I stop and think about it, that's kind of it, isn't it? He is really used to getting his way. And it's not a bratty thing. It's more that, like, he has such a compelling personality that he gets his way by sheer force of will because he convinces those around him. So usually when he convinces people, they have like real arguments about why he can't have what he wants or why they can't do what he's asking. And with her, she doesn't really have like a good reason beyond, I'll get in trouble, I've never done this before, I'm scared. And really, he just doesn't want to hear it. And to me, that's kind of funny, is like, there have been plenty of people that he has talked into things, but every time it's felt as if he took... I'm trying to think of how to say this. When people have said that I can't do the thing, they have had lots of like what feel like valid reasons, and even though Luffy steamrolls over them, it feels like he has so much less respect for her hang-ups for why she can't go. The fact that it really is mostly just that she is afraid, that he just can't hear. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, all of this comes down to him being like, I am going to help you get out of here. And if there's any, weapons thrown at you by this guy, I managed to save you once. I'll do it again. It'll be fine. And she, of course, eventually agrees to this, but it does take some time. And then when we cut back to the hall, Zoro has just taken down everybody in the room. And they are all just like, dude, why did you have to go so fucking hard? You didn't have to do it this way. You could have just like put them down and made your point. And instead, now you've got us in a position where we look like villains. And he, on his part, is like, excuse me, I saved all your asses. I came into this when there was like a fight already happening. I don't appreciate the fact that everybody is acting like I did something wrong when actually you should be thanking me. What the fuck? And it's funny because, like, I do get what he's saying, but also you did go quite hard, my guy, you know, like, and eventually the shouting match that's happening between him and Usopp is like, I said that we should just run away, and we should have done that and just left them here. And when what Zoro replies with is, that wouldn't even have worked because we don't know where Luffy is and we couldn't leave without him. Usopp, still yelling, responds with, that's a very good point that I hadn't considered. And I really do love the joke of somebody like continuing to shout at another person even though they have started agreeing with them. I always think that's funny. So yeah, Usopp's response here and the fact that it's almost like he just gets convinced this was necessary is genuinely really a good moment. Fucking Brook, by the way. We have Nami, who is asking the guards where the treasure room is. And when Usopp yells at her to knock it off, she turns around with her, like, innocent face. And we haven't seen this innocent face in a minute, and it's very fun. But then Brook is over here, and he starts singing, let's take a little break and turn those frowns upside down with rock. It'll be all right. No reason to fight. These words of mine aren't lies. Everybody dies. What are you doing, Brook? What is happening? Brook, I hesitate to say this because I feel very disloyal. Brook may be edging out Chopper for my favorite character. The one reason why that is still not happening is just because of his pervisoid tendencies. It's very hard for me to overlook. But the way he chimes in, the way he's like always punning, there's like, he always has some amazing, there's a point later where they're all screaming and he just says, screaming? How fun. And then screams also. I really do adore Brook so much. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that here. So the king has sort of like woken up wrapped in these fucking chains, and one of his dudes is saying like, this is really unfortunate that they managed to take down the king of the sea. And Neptune says it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't thrown my back out. I don't know when I became so old. This is all my fault. Forgive me. You guys, this is so relatable. I didn't realize what was happening at the time, but once I got the knowledge, I was able to look back at some points in my life and be like, oh, that's what that was. There was a point where I was, before my wedding, I was working with my friend Sydney, who was helping me to make my dress. And we were in the living room and we were spreading out this pattern that we had to print on like 8x11 regular printer paper and then fit together like a puzzle and tape into place. Very tricky. And I was trying to help Sydney, but I couldn't bend over, and I couldn't figure out why not. My back was killing me, and I was like, I didn't even do anything. And since then, I have realized I threw my back out, and like after a few days, it calmed down. But at the time, I was so frustrated with myself because this was something that we needed to do. It really did require two hands, and I was being useless. And I felt really, really guilty about it because Sydney had to do everything. And man, when you throw your back out, it is rough, kids. It's like, it's so annoying as you get older how little it takes. And it shocks me. Like I've done it at this point, I think like 3 times in my life. And I'm trying really hard now to like start doing another weightlifting program in order to get my core strength back, because that is what helps with this. But anyway, the fact that the king threw his back out and that's why he couldn't fight as well is extremely funny to me. So Zoro is saying, we've got to gather everybody up and get the Sunny and get the fuck out of here. And Usopp points out, even if we found the Sunny, we lost our coating on the ship as we came in here, so we wouldn't be able to get out anyway. My friends, I am so glad he pointed this out, because that did not even occur to me at all. Like, you know, we see the coating get taken off the ship, but because of the way it comes off, I think that I was under the impression that if they just passed through the same bubble wall, it would go back on. Which is not anything. Like, I just decided that was, you know, what? I feel like a real dodo bird. So yeah, that's a concern. And that winds up being part of the deal later when Zoro is talking to the princes and is like, okay, you're going to do something for us. He wants them to find the Sunny and to get the coating put back on. And I am not sure if they're going to actually uphold their end of things. That prince feels pretty, what's the word I want? He feels like he is trustworthy. And so I don't think that he would trick them for the sake of tricking them exactly. But I do feel as if he feels such duty to his people and such suspicion of the Straw Hats that he would think tricking them might just be the right thing to do under certain circumstances. So I'm just sort of concerned, you know, at this point on whether or not I can buy that he would carry this through. Nami, at this point, when they're talking about, you know, getting the coating put back on, she says, also, my log pose isn't working. It's been going haywire since we got here. And one of the dudes off to the side, who I'm calling in my head the mermaid Mr. Peanut, he says, you can't be serious. Which is so, if you believe a primitive pose like that will get you through the new world, then you're even dumber than you look. And Nami says, well, wait. Are you saying my gear isn't good enough? And he says, I'm not saying anything unless you untie me first. This is very fascinating, and it's something that I really like this development. That in addition to getting a coating on the ship, also, we've got to deal with the change in the whole way things work in the new world. I'm into it. And the log pose thing, you guys know, like, I just didn't really get it. It just felt like it just overall didn't make a lot of sense. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, really, you know, if we're going to be very literal about it. But overall, it always just felt so thin to me, despite being super important to everything, that I decided kind of consciously to set it aside and not really pay any attention to it. I am hoping that whatever it is we've got going on with the new equipment that she's going to need is going to feel more compelling. I just cross my fingers about it, because I want the rules to mean more. And I know I sound like such a fucking nerd when I say that. I'm sorry. I am not somebody who needs an intricate magical system. I don't. You guys know, if you listen to my other shows, that writers who go real hard on that sort of thing, I can respect it, but it's not something that particularly, like, is my bag. I just want everything to be internally consistent until it makes sense. And as long as I can say, okay, that makes sense, I'll walk away from it and you don't need to tell me anymore. It's fine. But the log post thing, as much as it's like meant to sort of seem internally consistent in the show, let's be real. Like, it was kind of jerk off motion. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. So the princes, they get back to the palace and they essentially ring the doorbell. And Zoro answers it. This voice actor, so most of the time, I'm going to be real, this voice actor phones it in. And it's lucky for him that he does, because it works for Zoro. Like, I feel like it, you know, but I can't say with confidence that the actor is consciously doing this because he understands that. I'm not trying to say he doesn't get that, but what I'm saying is it works out that he phones it in because of who Zoro is, and whether he means to or not is sort of irrelevant. I feel like the same voice actor who does Zoro does a lot of like the soldiers and the side character guys, and I feel the same way about those dudes a lot. That whatever he's doing with their voices feels very much like, all right, let's just get this done. And I like, normally it works just fine, but Zoro's voice answering this like doorbell ring is truly so hilarious to me, because he is just so, does not like, he answers it, but it's really giving like, I don't want to be here, as if he were actually on the job at work and feeling a bit of a way that he got called in on his day off because Matt is hungover and called in, and here he is doing this shit to cover for Matt again, who he told him don't drink too much that night. And did Matt listen? No, he did not. It's just got this whole feel to it. And eventually he's like, we'll let you in and we won't hurt anybody here as long as you run some errands for us. Nami cannot help but chime in and demand 1 million berries and unmarked cash. She just can't help herself. She just can't do it. So the prince agrees to like do this stuff, but again, we'll see. He says, I wouldn't normally share this information given the circumstances. However, I am honor bound to deliver the message regardless. And he tells them, Jimbei is reaching out to Luffy. These were meant to be delivered upon your arrival to the island as part of your welcoming. But here we are. And all of these people who work in the palace are like, Jimbei, wait, what? And it's very clear that this dude has a sort of standing with things, with everybody, that him being friends with Luffy is kind of like important and impressive, despite the fact that he's got his reasons for not actually coming down here. And it's Kami who is like, yeah, Jimbei is essentially a hero to all of these guys. So Zoro says, well, Luffy's not here, but I will pass the message on. And the first one is, do not fight Horty. And the second is, Jimbei will wait in the sea forest. That is all. Which is great, because we end up finding out that is where our friends are heading. And by friends, I mean the princess and Luffy. It's delightful. And that is also where Frankie winds up. So it's pretty, I am curious, and I don't know if anybody even has an answer to this, but you guys know that for me, it started to get a little bit old with our friends always getting separated and having to deal with separate people and then coming back together again. And I was wondering if there was a point where Oda mentioned the fact that he wanted to mix that up a little bit more, because like our friends have been separated here, but the intersection that it looks like is coming, that is something that we didn't really get to see that often. You know, they would be separated and they would kind of stay separate until it was time to deal with our big bad, and then all of a sudden we'd all find ourselves in the same place. So I am curious on whether or not the writer actually tired of this trope himself, or maybe I'm wrong about how this is going to shake out. It looks like we're all going to wind up regrouping, and then that, you know, doesn't even happen. I don't know. But the prince takes off to like fulfill their requirements, and then we go back to town. And oh my god, this is so funny, you guys. You know about that group of like tiny mermaids that all say different things, and how much I love the patterning of that. But when we go back to town, I think one of the fishermen says, have you heard the rumors going around about the Straw Hat Pirates? It's crazy. You think they really took over the palace? What is it they're even after? And one of the mermaids is like, that can't be. I met them. They seemed like such nice people. I can't believe they do such a thing. And then we have the little mermaids. I can't believe they do that. Can't believe they do that. I can believe they do that. Maybe I can't believe it either. Who cares if I can't believe it? This is not going to get old for me. I don't think it's just funny. But yeah, one of the guys is like, well, if they're doing this now, after what vision she had, Madame Chiarly, then they're definitely going to be coming for us shortly. And one of them says, let's see, I've heard that 2 of them have been hiding around here in the back of the Mermaid Cafe. That's why the guards are inspecting it right now. And all of a sudden, the door slams out of the back of the building, and here comes Chopper in a form that we have not seen before. This is... It's giving Gopher a little bit. He says it's time for Kung Fu Point. And understandably, all the guards are like, what even is this thing? Chopper just fucking handles these dudes in like a whirlwind. He's given Tasmanian Devil here and is yelling at everybody that Sanji needs peace and quiet to recover. And I do really love this being his motivation. He's not like, you tried to attack me. What the fuck? He's like, you're disturbing my friend who is unwell. So anyway, yeah, this is a real fun little development. And he's like, you want to take us to the palace? I don't know what's happening there, but we're not going. And then Sanji comes out, and Chopper is like, you're not supposed to be out of bed. What are you doing? And he's just got like a Band-Aid over his nose. That's really all there is to indicate how unwell he has been. And he looks around, and we cut from there to Luffy and the princess again arguing, and eventually she agrees to go with him. But it's like the way that they set it up is that she is going to hide in the mouth of her pet shark. And that way it just looks like Luffy and the shark are leaving. This shark, it looks like this is really difficult for him. I really felt for him, you guys. At one point, he like kind of vomits her up. She gets right back in, but it definitely is a moment of, oh no, you know? And as Luffy is trying to convince her, all of a sudden, there are these thuds, and the walls begin to shake. And when we go outside, there's just these sort of comet-like dark shapes that are hitting the tower, and the king is saying to all of the Straw Hats, guys, you have got to go and help the princess. You've got to do something. And Zoro is saying, dude, you're a fucking hostage. You don't get to tell us what to do. But King Neptune is like, look, I have been a good sport about this, all things considered. But if you don't fucking do something for my daughter, I am going to rip you to fucking shreds as soon as I get out of these chains. I do not give a shit. So Brooke says, oh, well, how could I possibly resist? I'll rush to her aid in this greatest moment of need. Completely selflessly, of course. Not a hint of an ulterior motive. Although if she wanted to show me her panties, that would be fine. I hate it, but also that was very funny. It was good. So he heads off, and then finally one of the guys, like, you know, the assistants, clerk, I don't know what you call these dudes, who are close to the king. But one of them yells out, like, you know, you please take me with you. You don't have to untie me, but I insist that I accompany you. And if anything happens to the princess, I will never be able to overcome my shame. And Brooke stops. There's a long pause. And then he turns around and says, I understand. You desire to see panties too. And grabs this guy up. I really want somebody to ask Brooke what kind of panties he imagines a mermaid would even have. How would that even work? I just want somebody to ask the question. That's all, you know? So eventually there comes the moment of Luffy and the princess leaving. And I love him just being like, because she's like, can I have a minute? And he's like, yeah, but just a minute because I don't like you. Oh God, it's so good, you guys. I just love him constantly saying this to her. I really do. I think it's like, it's mean-spirited, but also it isn't exactly mean-spirited coming from Luffy. He's just so matter-of-fact about things, you know? So then we go to Frankie, who, he is with this guy named Den, who was apparently Tom's brother. I don't remember if we saw how he found this guy. This is like, it feels a little bit out of nowhere for me, and I was a bit confused over this because I'm like, did we see him going and finding a taxi at one point? I'm so sorry if we did, and I don't remember, but my memory has been shot lately. Yeah, I don't know what's happening. But he's asking Den to help him find the Sunny. And, you know, he's understandably like, this place is humongous, so where do I even start with looking for it? And Den says, it's weird, but every, like, ship that winds up sinking always ends up in the same place, so I guarantee that we're going to be able to find it. And it turns out it's the Sea Forest, which is the place that Luffy and the princess are also heading, and the place where Luffy has been asked to meet up with Jimbei as well. So I'm trying to jump past the spot where Luffy escapes with the princess, because we saw this already. A bunch of the dudes who have been slammed into the tower, which is what those comet-like moments... I didn't know what was going on, you guys. I thought that maybe all of these dudes were axes, but then I was like, how can they be if they're not going straight for the princess? Because we saw how that went with the axe, and it was like, it was really coming for her person. But evidently these dudes don't exactly have that same accuracy, or being that they are people and not solid metal, they can't just go through the wall. And so we see just like 30 guys, I guess, just on the ground outside of the tower. Some of them, it seems like, aren't going to get up again. But there's a good number that are able to get back to their feet. And Brooke is disgusted with them when they begin to try and come at him. He calls them rude, which I really do appreciate. So this the fight, it's like kind of nothing ultimately because Brooke is such a badass. But let's go to the pirate ship because they're talking about what they're going to do. We've sort of like backed up a little bit and we're finding out exactly what's even happening. So I'm trying to remember. Oh, that's right. It's Horty. I keep wanting to say Hoagie. But yeah, this is the point where Vanderdecken is telling all of the humans, you have the chance to be part of an amazing mission. And the way that they frame this is just, you get to sacrifice your lives for something that's incredibly important and you should be really grateful for it. Now, what I liked about this a lot, because I was wondering this. So there's a guy in stripes that Vanderdecken is like, hey, come here. And as he is asking this dude to come forward, Hachi comes out of the dark. I love that he's got crutches. I really thought that maybe he was going to have like several crutches because he's got several armpits. But no, he has just got the one set. And Hachi is yelling at them like, you guys are fucking up your bodies and destroying the island is going to, it's really undermining everything. You're going to regret this. And Horty, for his part, is like, oh, fucking Hachi. Dude, I can't believe that you were part of the Arlong pirates. I actually respected you at one point. And now here you are whining and complaining about all of this and trying to defend humans. And it's fucking pathetic. And I'm disappointed in you. We're the superior race. And you wouldn't have joined Arlong if you didn't believe that. So what the fuck? And he says there is no superior race. The two of you refused to help Arlong when he was in power. So why? Because he's talking to like the two assistant guys. And the drunk dude says, I'm doing it for the money. Arlong didn't pay very much. Like, he was just stingy. But Horty is out here giving me plenty. So, yeah, I am 100% here for this. That's fine. And let's see, Decken. A sight for sore eyes, an angry Hachi. I remember what happened back then. Arlong had the nerve to ask me to work underneath him. What a preposterous idea. Vanderdecken never works under anybody. Horty gets that better than anyone. I mean, Horty is saying that now. I wouldn't rely on that, is all I'm saying. Florian's in the chat. I'm so sorry. I went away from the chat because I didn't think there was anybody there anymore. But Florian says, Minister of the Left and Minister of the Right is what the two dudes closer to the king are called. But I do not know who's who. Also, they have real names, but I can't remember right now. That's fine. Minister of the Left and Right is what I shall call them when I am referring to them as a group. So to jump ahead a little bit there, Horty is talking about, like, we were able to watch the Arlong pirates and see what you fucked up on and learn from your mistakes. So thank you for that. We are going to pick up where he left off, and this time it's going to be done right. I don't really get why you aren't supporting us since you supported Arlong for so many years, but it is quite disappointing, and you should know that Straw Hat Luffy is on Fishman Island, and we see this as the perfect opportunity to get some revenge on him for what he did. Hachi can't help but be like, oh God, he looks at me as his friend. How can I face him when you're clinging to Arlong's legacy? And Horty is genuinely horrified that he's friends with a human and says essentially, oh, this is a human lover? Get the fuck out of my sight. So, at this point, Vanderdecken comes up to Hachi and says, I feel like you've really forgotten the way things are done around here. But with pirates, you use violence. So I'm going to show you something. He tosses a dagger up in the air after touching Hachi on the shoulder. And he turns to Hachi and says, did you see how when I touched you, I marked you as my new target? No matter what I throw or where I throw it, it will always make its way back to whatever I mark. Not only that, but it'll come back at you full speed. The dagger soars toward Hachi's face. Hachi ducks, and then it just turns around and stabs him in the back. So he's the one that ends up being the example instead of Stripes guy. And he says, of course, there are some limitations. Can you figure them out? And he goes and gets a whole quiver of arrows. Hachi is yelling at Horty, you've got to make him stop. But of course, Horty is just like, dude, you're not even a fish man. And Vanderdecken doesn't answer to me. We're allies. So you're fucking getting on my nerves. Yeah, he could do what he wants. Go ahead, Decken. Hachi gets up and starts to run. And Vanderdecken throws all of the arrows into the air, and they all go for Hachi at once. And he's trying to get like into the water so that he can swim away from them. It does not matter. These things, it's really like anxiety inducing the way that they follow him. But yeah, he gets into the water and he thinks, once I'm in here, they'll have to sink. And he looks behind him and no, they are still coming through. They go right through that bubble. It doesn't have any effect whatsoever. And so he is trying to swim toward the other bubble. And I'm not sure if he's trying to get out or in. I think he's trying to get back into Fishman Island, that the pirates are outside of the bubble of the island. But whatever it is, he winds up getting nailed. And I really felt bad for him. This was just so grim. Like, I'm sure is still alive, but I just don't like seeing somebody being pursued in this way where they have the illusion that they're going to be able to get away somehow, and we know it's just not going to happen. So anyway, Vanderdecken just begins to chuck dudes. So I'm gonna back up a little bit here to the way that Horty explains how this is. Vanderdecken is going to treat your bodies like live ammunition. You'll be cannon fodder. He is going to throw you at the walls of the tower. And since weapons can't smash it, most of you guys aren't going to be able to do anything either. But you can open the gate from inside the palace and let us in. That's the only thing that you have to do. And all these dudes are like, there's no possible way that we'll still be alive to do this. And Horty is like, well, probably. But who cares? You're humans. We don't give a shit. If you can survive the impact, do what I sent you to do, and I'll set you free. But if you won't do it, I'll kick you out of this bubble right now. And, of course, if they get kicked out of the bubble, they die. So they have to agree to this whole thing. So I'm realizing, like, I'm edging on running out of time here. So eventually, one of the dudes does indeed open the gate and manages to give them the in. We go back to Sanji and Chopper, and Sanji is saying, I have a question for you guys. I just want to ask them about the Ryugu Palace. Is the mermaid princess there? Understandably, Chopper is like, you can't go see her. If she's beautiful, it may kill you. And Sanji's like, well, it might be fine. But I'm sure she is beautiful. And he asks one of the guards, and they're like, well, they have said that she's quite lovely. Then lead the way. Let's stop fighting. Take me. Wait, which way is the palace? My true love awaits. All these guards are like, the fuck is wrong with this guy? And they're like, all right, you know what? If he wants to go, fine, great. We'll just go. Clap him in irons. Let's head out. But once they actually start to put the irons on him, he kicks them and says, how am I supposed to cook for her if you put me in handcuffs? This is his reasoning. So the fact that he fights back, they're taking as evidence of him being a bad man who is, belongs in jail. He accuses all of them of being jealous of his love, and he beats the shit out of them and turns them into basically like a guard cyclone. And I love Chopper just being like, you were fucking innocent before you did that. And I couldn't help but be like, Chopper, do you remember one episode ago when you were kicking the shit out of these guards also? What are you doing? Why are you... I don't know if it's Chopper just thinking like it was fine if they thought I was guilty, but now you're in trouble. Maybe that's all he means, but it felt like he was sort of accusing Sanji the same way Usopp accused Zoro, except he was also fucking up everybody around him, so I don't understand it. But yeah, so they are standing there. Some woman starts screaming. Sanji is like, oh, a woman in distress. He runs to help her, and it turns out that she's screaming because Hachi's body has washed up. He's still alive, but he is covered in arrows like a pincushion. And he says, it's you guys. I'm happy to see you. Oh my God. There's something about him saying, I'm happy to see you, when he's injured so severely that is really, really sad. It got to me. It's so pitiful. And he tells Sanji, you guys have got to get the fuck out of here. Like, get on your boat and leave. You don't want any of this smoke. And I was sort of like, you have got to know that they can handle these guys, right? You don't... I just guess Hashi hasn't seen how much they have advanced. But yeah, he's insisting that the entire kingdom will fall to these dudes, and you probably want to book it while you still can. Brook has come back, and he's got the... what is it? The minister of the left or right, one of them, and they report to the king the princess has been kidnapped, that there are people slamming into the tower, and that's what they heard. And all of this is just like, really... It's interspersed with Luffy and the princess traveling. He mentions at one point that he sneezes every now and then here, and I don't know if that's what's going on with the shark also. But when he asked the princess like what the deal is with the sea forest, she explains that it's a graveyard and that's where her mother is buried. So we get a little bit of that story, but I feel like we're going to get more of it later. So I'm not going to talk about that because I'm like really running out of time here. So, okay, let's jump into the third of these episodes. Let's see. Oh yeah, here it is. So first we've got all of these guards who are watching a bunch of fish coming in from the Fishman district. He's like, I don't know, something seems to be wrong with the snail, and all these people, it seems like a lot just for shopping. It may be dangerous, but I don't really have any like evidence to go on here. And when we see him like looking out his window, we see that this is Horty and his guys coming in. with all of their crazy fucking animals. Oh my God, you guys, I started to talk about it and I forgot. But when I said there was something I was glad they addressed, I was wondering how the marking people worked for the mark fruit, because I was like, he can still hit the princess, but he's got to have touched other people. And then it's mentioned that he wears a glove explicitly so that he can maintain his mark on her. But evidently, if you're able to get that glove off and get him to touch somebody else, his mark won't work anymore on her unless he touches her again. So that's a pretty big, like, weakness, I guess. We have Robin, who is waiting for a bus, which I'm guessing is a fish with a bus attached. And all of these guards begin, like, running up to her and telling her that she, you know, she's a suspect and we're taking you into custody. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And also, you just said you're here because of a psychic, which sounds idiotic. I really expected better of this place's culture. That's silly. And I want to go to the forest, and you're going to make me miss my bus. So I'm not going to go with you. Thank you, but pass. And they start to come at her, and she uses her ability. It's so good. Mille fleurs. And all of these hands, like, it's not like they come up out of the ground like I'm used to and yank her down. They are covered with the shadow of the piles of hands. And you don't even get to see exactly what she did. It's just a massacre. And one of the dudes just says, if anybody can get up, try to stop her. And that's the best they can do. And then we see her on the ship and she's saying to herself, there is a poneglyph somewhere. I know that the crew can take care of themselves. I'm going to go find the thing. I think it's genuinely funny how, like, disconnected from everything Robin is so often. She's literally like, fuck that crew. They could do whatever they need. I have my shit to do. Oh, Robin. What? I don't understand you sometimes. I do understand you, but also, like, she should, you know, whatever. It's fine. It's fine. So let's see. I'm going back to the palace, and oh yeah, this is the part where the pirates are able to actually open the door. And this is when Megalo is, like, gagging, and Luffy is like, are you okay? Are you sick? Or do you need to take a break? And she pops out of his mouth and then goes right back in, but he still seems distressed when he goes back in, when she goes back into his mouth. So I don't know. My God. One of the dudes is suggesting that we have tea with the pirates because that will maybe, like, calm them down. And Zoro is just screaming, yelling at this guy, and Nami and Usopp are over there just like, how did we wind up here? And Usopp says, that's because our crew are a bunch of idiots who always get violent about everything. Brooks says, speaking of Luffy, I wonder if he came across the mermaid princess. I'd still quite like to meet her. And Neptune here collapses and is just like, I can't believe that you would do this to my little girl. And all of them are like, we didn't though, dude. We had nothing to do with it. And eventually, he's like, oh, you know what? I figured it out. Straw Hat had my daughter swim into her shark's mouth, and then the two of them went out together, and all of his men just start laughing at him and are like, dude, that's hilarious, but come on, let's be serious. And I love the fact that he just got that completely right. Oh, yeah. Luffy says the shark is making him sneeze, and when the princess is like, sharks make you sneeze? That's kind of weird. He says they don't, but sometimes I sneeze out of nowhere. It's weird. And I'm really curious what that's going to turn out to be. So I'm just trying to make sure that I don't miss anything major in this back half, because I have talked about things out of order. And so it's sort of hard to know. But Frankie finds the Sunny. He is really impressed with this sea forest. And there's all these, like, whales and fish and everything. And he talks to Den about why he doesn't look anything like Tom. And Den's like, oh, yeah, it just has to be that you've got a certain type of, like, fish in your lineage. And your kid could have one of those traits. It really doesn't work the way that it does with humans, where it's the parents specifically that a kid ends up looking like. And he keeps asking also why, like, whether or not Frankie's parents were robots. And Frankie has to be like, no, that's really just not how this works either. And he also keeps saying with gusto, the way that Tom did. We find out about Jimbei waiting over here in the forest because he's a wanted man. We go back to all of the pirates coming in, and let's see. He's looking around at all of the guards and grinning to himself, saying, oh, they look really scared. And they're clearly taken completely by surprise, despite the fact that they were warned it was a bunch of pirates slamming into the tower. And Zoro is looking at them and is just eyes narrow. You can see that he is getting ready for another fight and is very excited about all of this. Neptune doesn't, like, he recognizes Horty's name in a vague sense, but I expected him to be like, oh, it's you. Not so, though. He's just kind of like, oh, I think I know that name. And it's a real sort of, like, this dude isn't as important as I expected. So this is when Zoro says, more visitors. This is not like the last batch. And one of the fucking dudes is like, oh, they're here because of you. Clearly you're in league with each other. You let them in. And Usopp is like, how the fuck do you figure that? We wouldn't even have come here if you guys hadn't explicitly invited us. We don't even know who these people are. And the guards are like, you have got to give us our weapons back. We need to fight these guys. Neptune does recognize Vanderdecken and is like, oh, so you're the one who stole my daughter. It wasn't one Straw Hat. But Vanderdecken is like, wait a second. Stole your daughter? Wait, she's not here? What the fuck? Are you serious? And he goes to her tower and he sees that she is gone and is upset and is like, I am going to go and find her. This is just, this is the only thing that he is interested in. I love when he's just like, how am I to find her? And Horty is like, what do you mean, how are you to find her? You've got a fucking power. Are you that blinded with love that you just forgot that you can do that? That's your whole thing, literally. And I was like, yeah, but I think it's just meant to be a moment for everybody in the room to understand his power, to, like, hear about it for the first time. Because it's Nami who is just like, what power? What does that even mean? So Vanderdecken turns around and leaves, and everybody is just sort of like, wait, why? Where is he going? And he uses one of those pieces of coral and creates a little bubble for himself and just sails out. And he says, okay, Coral, find my princess for me. And he breaks off a huge chunk outside of the palace and sends it flying and then just rides on it like it's a bus. And it ends with him saying, nothing can separate us. Our love is too intense. The only thing that can separate us is death. And that is the end of the episode. Except for Luffy telling her about the fart some fart story. I don't know. But that's really, we're going to ignore that part and talk about Vanderdecken as the end of the episode. All right, I've got to wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Sorry this went on so long. I appreciate you all. Thank you, Florian, for being here. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.